Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Exercise is Bullshit, which we've obviously decided conclusively stands for bodybuilding, utilizing logical lifting and scientific heuristics to inform training. I am joined again today by my good friend, Jack Oosten of Jacked and Lean infamy in Rogers, Minnesota. Their gym is coming up on their 6-month anniversary. Jack, for people who don't know you, why don't you reintroduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, how'd you get into strength training and coaching, and then we'll get going. I'm super excited to kick this one off.
That is my absolute favorite iteration of the bullshit acronym so far. So great job. But yeah, my name is Jack. I'm the Jack of Jacked and Lean. My wife, Eileen, and I, Lean and Jacked and Lean, own Jacked and Lean Coaching and Jacked and Lean Gym, which is basically a manifestation of our coaching up in Rogers. A gym designed to bring education to everybody and anybody who wants it. Yeah, man, I'm super pumped to be here. I love every time I'm on the podcast.
Yeah. And for those of our listeners who are in the Minnesota area, if you haven't been out to the Jacked and Lean gym, you definitely need to check it out. They do day passes. It's a great atmosphere. It's very different than a lot of, it's got kind of that, my wife and I, we travel around to a lot of gyms. We just went to Midwest Health and Fitness the other day, which I actually really liked. It's kind of like, I think I told you about that place in Utah that I'd been that was just like somebody's garage, but it just felt like a rich dude's garage. This felt like a cool guy who actually liked strength training's garage, like big garage that he just committed to exercise equipment. And he had some really cool stuff in there. But your place is, I would say, different. One, because you have so much fucking equipment, and it's a big space, but it's just so jam packed full of stuff that it almost doesn't seem as big as it is. It's got to be close to 130 pieces or something now.
Yeah.
And it's very high ceilings. It's not dark at all. The music is always on point. So it's different than a lot of like iron gyms that I've been to where they're dark and grimy and stuff. It still has that cool like vintage feel. Obviously, you've got some really new like state of the art pieces and then some really cool vintage stuff. I mean, really vintage, like old school blue Nautilus, like older than your parents are kind of machine.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool blend of stuff. But why don't you give us kind of an update on how everything's been going? You've been at it for 6 months now. I'd love to know what's kind of the biggest unexpected challenge you've faced since you've opened.
That's a great question. Everything's been going great so far. It's been fun, actually, kind of going through this experience because we wanted to open this gym for a long time, obviously. And this gym, I would say, it's obviously not only a manifestation of our coaching, but it's a passion project. I've collected exercise equipment for 9 years now or so, and it's just something I wanted more space to put more cool stuff in. And so we got this gym, and this gym's kind of a manifestation of that as much as it is our coaching. And as a result of that, one of the most unexpected things I've had to come across is people perceiving my gym inherently like another gym. Meaning, what obviously, like you said, I'm trying to do something different. High quality people, high quality equipment, high quality experience. But my gym is not just a gym; it's more than a gym. It's actually more like a private gym, if you will. I want this gym to be a gym where you come in and you have access to top level education. Any trainer that's in this gym, as a high level trainer, you have the best of the best equipment. You're not having to wait on pieces. Everyone in there's a good person. And people inherently, I think, just Google gyms in the area and then they see this gym versus a Lifetime versus whatever. And they think I'm kind of one of those types of gyms and I'm just not even the same. So you could drop one of those gyms right next to me and I could really honestly care less because I'm not trying to do anything that they're trying to do. I'm not trying to compete on a membership basis. I'm not trying to compete on just like a race to the bottom for rates. None of that. It's a very curated like experience that's only becoming more and more prevalent as we like do more seminars and educational things and create resources. So the biggest trouble or struggle has been getting that word out there.
Yeah, and how do you think you guys have kind of handled that? Because obviously there is a lot of, Minnesota is kind of, I would say, coming up in the sort of space of different bodybuilding gyms, and I've seen like a huge resurgence just in general, and I'm sure you've seen it. It's very cool, like as an equipment enthusiast, but then it's also very frustrating to see like these pieces that, we've talked about this ad nauseum, like 5 years ago, you could get for $300 on Facebook Marketplace. And now they're more expensive than brand new equipment. But how have you kind of educated people that have come in the door? Like, obviously I've seen it, but I'd love to kind of have our listeners kind of understand how you've sort of adapted and are continuing to adapt to making this more than a gym?
That's a great question. Specifically, one thing that everyone gets when they walk through the door is a personal tour of the gym. This is not just one of those swipe in and we'll see you later. Good luck figuring out all the crazy machines back there. Every single person gets a walkthrough, regardless of how many times they've been in a gym or not. Because, yeah, we have some rare pieces that you don't know how to use, and people who've been trained for 30 years don't know how to use. But more importantly, I want you to just get like acclimated to the vibe and the feel. It gives us a chance to kind of talk about how we do things here, et cetera, et cetera. And then 95% of the time, because I'm here basically all day, every day, me, the owner, personally gets to introduce myself and gets to talk to you a little bit. And that usually leads to some sort of, hey, what are you training for? What are your goals? Or, what are you going to train today even? And I'll show people machines how to, what machines to use that day and even take them through a set. So it's just much more of like a personal experience when you come in. And I've had people come back after a single day pass, a couple months later, and I'd say their name at the door and they're like, holy crap, you remember my name. And that to me is the experience that other gyms won't offer.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a big gym that's kind of expanded that we both know how they've kind of taken off recently, and that's not the vibes you get in there. And I like going to that place, and they have some really cool stuff in some of their locations. But it's like it just feels like, I mean, even some of the stuff on the like in the bathrooms. Like I've been to the one in Brooklyn Park, and it's like, don't spit your fucking zins in the toilet. Like there's a big sign, which is very appropriate. Like you shouldn't do that. Like that's a
Right.
good thing to tell clients to do, but it's not. Again, it's just not very approachable. Like it seems like if you go into that place and you ask for help or you ask for direction, somebody's just going to kind of scoff at you. So I guess my biggest question is, what's kind of the future look like? And this is not our topic at all today. I'm just kind of curious now that I have a couple minutes to talk to you. But what does the future kind of look like for Jacked and Lean? Because obviously that personal touch, as from books like Good to Great and how to multiply and grow your business, it's going to be hard to keep that sort of small town, really humble kind of approach as you try to scale. So is that sort of the future? What does the kind of future look like for Jacked and Lean?
you know, Jacked and Lean is built on like an incredibly personalized approach to your goals. Training, nutrition, psychology, sleep. Like I tailor everything to what you need. And I've never been one to put out cookie cutter programs or try to put things at crazy scale because I know it loses that personal touch. And I've lost or sacrificed, I should say, revenue as a result of that because I want to keep that personal touch. Because what you see is what you get when it comes to myself and my wife and my brand, and I want to keep that vibe. And so, like you said, it's hard to scale, and I've asked myself that question a lot. Like, what's next? Now, I know for a fact it's not trying to open 10 gyms because at some point you lose that personal touch. I would rather scale one gym and make it 20,000, 30,000, more like a mecca itself. Like you come to the Jack Lean gym to like experience like what Jack and Eileen have to offer, right? And maybe one more gym if it's not too far away, so that way I can have the ability to go to both. So maybe another gym, but more so like just continue to expand this gym's influence. I think about this gym as like almost like an influencer, such that resource creation out here, podcasts, you come in, I'll take you through the best session you've ever had in your life. And maybe you don't work with me long term, but you just need some troubleshooting on like how to activate your glutes on a hip thrust, right? Like I want this gym to be a hub where you come in and that alone, I think would scale our influence versus trying to just honestly, yeah, man, sell like more and more and more memberships, which you do lose that over time. So
Yeah, I
maybe
think
a capped
that would
membership, all that kind of stuff, right?
yeah, and obviously as you grow the location size too, and like physically move to a different space potentially in the future, that could be cool to see. And as we both know, it's not like you're not going to have more equipment because Jack unloaded all the stuff out of his house and is now currently loading more stuff into his home gym, which I don't even know when you have the opportunity to work out at home because every time I'm at the gym, I see you there. So, all right, well let's kind of try. That's all super cool, man. it's been really fun to kind of see you guys grow and expand. And again, I can see the difference, the standard you set when I go there and when I go to other places. So it's not lost on me, and I'm
Appreciate
sure
that.
that's the same with anybody that's been there too. So what I kind of wanted to talk to you about today is one of my favorite topics that I talk to clients about, that I just gets brought up all the time when it comes to resistance training and just bodybuilding in general, is this idea of optimization versus sufficiency. So for those that aren't aware or haven't heard me talk about this before, I would describe optimization as like super granular, right? Like focusing on every single detail, trying to get the absolute most out of your physique. So I think a lot of times people come into resistance training. Maybe they're older, they're busy, they don't have a lot of time to do stuff, and they think that they want to optimize because they've really tried to optimize other parts of their life, but really what they want is sufficiency. And sufficiency to me is basically what I do as a personal trainer, which is very different than what Jack does in his business. Is most bang for your buck in the least amount of time, right? So think like 2 30-minute workouts per week, 10,000 steps, eat more whole foods, basically like the lowest hanging fruit to move the dial in the right direction. So that's what I always kind of preach to my clients about, is like, let's get the big things done first, because you don't really need to get granular. Is there anything you would add to either of those? And then today, what I really do want to focus on is like, what does it look like for men's health optimization to actually really get granular? So anything to add to those two first?
Yeah. So first off, the conversation between like optimization and sufficiency, I like that a lot. Um, I believe that everything exists on a continuum. Nothing is black or white in my world. It's all a sliding scale. So the biggest thing is just getting down to identifying what the version of yourself that you want to accomplish is. How do you want to walk, talk, think, act, operate your business, look like? List as many things as possible, and then list where you are in relation to all those things right now, and just see what gap exists. And are you okay with like X gap, but not with this Y gap? And in that case, go tackle that until you feel like it's at a satisfactory level. And I think that's all it comes down to, is just getting clarity on what you want out of life. And that way I can help reverse engineer that goal a little bit more clearly. Sure, I do believe healthy humans need to eat, basically meat, eggs, fruit based type diet, right? A whole foods diet, train from 3 to 5 days a week, a little cardio, 8, 10,000 steps, like sleep 8 hours. I've been way bigger on like sleep and stress management, even than training. Because I just think that drives so much when it comes to managing your internal health, energy levels, everything else. Uh, but again, the level you need to dial each of those things in comes back to how far do you want to take your goals? Like, what are your goals? Just get clear on that.
Yeah, I love that. And so when it comes to, again, my business is basically focused on helping people take that first step, and it's super sustainable, right? So most of the clients that I have don't want to go into the bodybuilding space. But there's a few that have longer term goals after they start getting some progress, or they get extra motivated. And the reason I wanted to have you on to talk about this topic specifically is, we've had this conversation before. If somebody starts to really want to focus on what's the next thing I can do, I've been doing this for a while, I really want to push to the limit. That's out of my wheelhouse a little bit, because for me, the sufficiency piece is like, for 99% of the population, we can get 95% of the way there, right? But for those people that actually want to see like, what's their absolute best, what can they potentially obtain that they thought was impossible before, like, that's when I call in the big guns, which is you, right? To really help them dial in on all of that stuff. So what are in your mind kind of a few of the big factors, and I really want to focus on like men's health particularly today, holding men back once they get past that sufficiency phase?
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends what you qualify as sufficiency. Meaning, are they just doing macros or just tracking their total protein intake? If so, obviously the next step is like a more tailored meal plan. I believe that if you want to like optimize your results from a nutritional level, you must have a meal plan, because a meal plan, it's not just chicken, rice, broccoli. A well designed meal plan, the way that myself and my team do it, is we plug things into chronometer. We're looking at micronutrients. We're reading lab work to identify where potential deficiencies are. We're assessing if there is a deficiency. Is it because you're not intaking enough, or maybe you're utilizing too much, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all the things when it comes to optimization that comes back out as a meal plan. And so if sufficiently you were just following a meal plan, but you weren't taking into consideration like how your daily habits and your rhythms and your genetic predispositions to overutilization, all that, whatever it may be, then that's the gap that you're you're not taking advantage of, and then that's where I come in. So from like a meal planning perspective, I think it gets that granular again, like lab work and all that kind of stuff. From a training perspective, instead of training, just kind of when you can get it in during the week, you're now planning based on whatever body part you want to grow or numbers you want to hit for powerlifting style lifting. You're like structuring your week and your recovery capacity, your sleep, like all these things roll together, but you're just being more intentional about each one of these variables now to push more specific goals forward. Right, your goal is no longer I just want to like feel better, even though that is still what it is at the base. But now my goal is to grow my arms. My goal is to see that last little section of my abs I've never seen before, like that type of stuff. And then we can reverse engineer that with more detailed meal plan, more detailed training. You're no longer getting just 6.5, 7.5 hours of sleep. You're getting 8.5, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make
No,
sense?
that's 100% the kind of granular nature I was looking for. And I think that will help too for people who think that they like really want to go down this road. Like, is this stuff that you can commit to, right? Because if you've been, the example I kind of had in my head was somebody who's maybe doing like our style of training for a while, where maybe they've been doing like minimal dose, single set of everything. Their diet's okay, but it could be better. You've started to kind of plateau with your weights, but you want to take it to the next level. It's like there's I can play around with all that same stuff as well, but I get minimum time unless somebody's doing our health coaching program to really dial into the intricacies with them. So I think that's where having a coach that can actually take that time and, like you said, reverse engineer this entire program backwards can really be beneficial. So there's a few things I had kind of highlighted, and obviously you touched on a few of them, as far as things that I kind of thought of right off the top of my head that were holding men back specifically. And this is probably women too, but obviously today we're talking about men. So my list was intensity, meaning like how hard are they actually working into their sets, and we'll kind of break down each one of these a little bit more. Volume, right? So how much are they doing? Is it too little? Is it the right amount of volume? Are they just going to the gym? Maybe they're like a bro that's just started lifting and they're going 6 days a week. Maybe it's too much volume kind of thing. And they're just not doing the right, smart kind of volume. Nutrition, obviously, you dial that in. Tracking, more well rounded eating, having a meal plan that's actually structured instead of just like going for your calorie goal each day. And then hormone optimization. Is there anything else that you would add to that list of things holding men back before we jump into that?
Yeah. So intensity, volume, hormone optimization, nutrition, all that for sure. Honestly, man, again, sleep and stress and like the psychology aspect of it. Just I see so many people when they want to go next level. It's like when you're trying to invest into a business, but you have no money in your bank account because you're not sleeping and you're not managing your psychology and you don't have some of these baseline like habits, your ability to thought stop and reframe constantly. You keep giving in to the whims of your day, right? I think mental toughness, for example, is not just it's not just being able to pick yourself back up when you break. It's not breaking in the first place. And so if you want to start going next level, I think part of that is like the whole psychology, like, more of a Kobe-esque mindset where like you're just so incredibly driven and you're so set mentally on it that nothing's going to deter you, because you could want to do the meal plan, want to do the training plan, all this stuff, but you're not getting that stuff dialed in. So all the other stuff is great. That's all kind of programming stuff. But I think like giving yourself the proper account to like draw from is crucial when it comes to
Yeah,
optimizing results.
I love that. And I think that's super. And what I'm kind of hoping to do here too is like for people that have been thinking about maybe dipping their toe into working with a coach, somebody like you. Obviously, I think Jack is the best in business, so I would highly recommend working with him. But hopefully, like if you think, I want to take it to the next level, and you start hearing some of this stuff, and you go, I don't want to fucking take it to the next level. Like this is not, I'm not ready for that yet because I think it is, and that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Like it is I think everybody has the capacity to do that and be a better version of themselves, but not everybody's in the right mindset and the right place to start. So like as we go through this stuff too, I think it's important to, realize like, is this something that I can fit into my life right now? And if the answer is no, that's not a bad thing. But I think for the people who are listening and are like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want. Like these are the things that I need. Those are the people I would emphasize. Like find a coach, whether it's Jack or somebody else, and really like see what you can accomplish. Take that next step.
Yeah, I think a big component of all of this is almost breaking down. I love what you said about that. Like, it's okay to not want to optimize right now. Cause I say that type of thing to my client all the time. Like, just tell me what you want. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I don't want to put a goal on you that you don't want because ultimately we know you're not going to hit it. Like something like prep, for example. People casually want to do like a bodybuilding prep because they think it's some epitome of health and fitness. That if I go on stage, I'm going to now I'm into health, I'm into fitness, I'm a healthy person, which I know and we know from having been in the industry a while, that's not always the case, right? First time, you're always the healthiest person just because you go through prep. And sometimes it comes out really negatively on the other side. But basically, people perceive that, so they start a prep. They don't really realize what's going to happen in the prep, and then they end up breaking because it's more than they bargained for. And so I now when I'm talking to people about a prep, I'm very very clear that like it is something that you have to want. Like you have to want whatever this goal is, because in that realm, then you're going to be able to optimize it easier. And so I think there's like kind of tiers here. There's like maximum optimality for all of life. And that's like, I think where a lot of like biohackers take that even a little bit too far, right? And then there's like optimizing with your current circumstances. And I still think those can get pretty damn close. And then the question is, if you want to make that leap, you got to, where are the gaps that are allowing me that I'm not able to optimize that a little bit more? And then there's one step, regress from that, which is you have these circumstances, but now you're not optimizing anything. And then but you're maybe thinking a little bit, and then there's just not caring at all. And so you got to just kind of know where you are in the continuum. Because I think a lot of people will say, well, I can't be the most optimized human of all time because I have kids and I have a business. So I'm not going to really kind of do anything at all. And I believe that is the wrong line of thought. I still think optimization can live in this realm of what are your current constraints and how can we optimize within that? Because if you get that ball rolling more often than not, I see people wanting to go to like that next level. So it's just understanding where you are on this continuum of optimality and ability to optimize, right?
Yeah, I love that. So let's break each of these that we kind of highlighted. And I added obviously sleep and psychology here, that you kind of touched on, but just going a little bit deeper on each of these. And again, like you mentioned, the intensity, the volume piece, those are more like programming specific. But I think it would be helpful for people to uh, like we've had conversations about this before, but to rethink how they're approaching those two things, and just like a 30,000 foot view of their training, whatever that looks like at the moment. If they're doing something that's more minimalistic, like we do, or if they're doing something that's they're trying to get bigger, get stronger, but they maybe haven't worked with a coach yet, and they don't really understand how to start targeting that stuff.
Yeah. So as far as if you want to optimize like your results in the gym, what should you be doing intensity and volume wise? The essence of training has always come back to you got to recover from what stress you put yourself under. So that's number one is, and that's why we'll talk about all the other stuff. But if you don't have that proper base to like handle the training stress from, you're already going to fall flat. And so inherently, that's why something like a lower volume approach and a higher intensity approach, I find tends to be better long term, is because you're getting more out of less. You're not expending as much unnecessary energy or some junk volume as people will say. But two, it just requires less total recovery resources, which most people, unless you're a truly high level bodybuilder, have other things in your life going on. And I truly, from experience, have not seen better results with people doing 3 or 4 sets versus two. It's even sometimes one per exercise. But then I'm a big fan of less sets per exercise, more exercises, because when I'm looking at things like how am I going to maximize this muscle group, I'm looking at all the different angles, different loading pattern, loading profiles of different movements, and how can I marry all these together. And so we can kind of talk deeper on that at some point if you want to here. But I'm already trying to hit so many now movements that if I do 3 or 4 sets per movement and I have like 8, 9 movements in a workout, that's just going to burn me out. And really, no one's going to be able to recover from that, no matter how much you're optimizing recovery. One other aspect to this volume, like what's kind of that threshold is, I think everyone's always concerned about how much can I butt up against this upper end, or my, MRV, if you will, my maximum recoverable volume. If you think about it, if you're always redlining that, even the smallest perturbation then is going to tip you over that threshold, and you're going to have a more aggressive pullback. The goal of training isn't always to butt up to that threshold. It's to find what is the maximum stimulus you can acquire, and then obviously also recover from. Right. And so I think somewhere in that, like 1 or 2 sets per exercise, more exercises per body part, you get the stimulus, move on to the next one. That's my favorite way to train people who are looking for maximum results.
So just spending a little bit more time there and getting a little bit more granular on that. When you're doing an exercise that maybe you've been doing, say 3 or 4 sets on, what can somebody really look for from an intensity perspective if they're switching that now to 1 or 2 sets? How would you sort of coach someone or educate somebody about what that expectation for that each and every set should look like, especially if you go from two down to one? Just talk a little bit more about the attentional focus aspect as you're getting closer to failure. Should you be taking all of those sets to failure? What can they be kind of expecting from a control perspective, especially if they're doing 4 sets and they're just kind of cranking them out and trying to get as many reps as they can? So get a little more granular on that piece.
Yeah, of course. Like anything in life, the intentionality is the intensity, in my opinion. Like, you're not going to just go to a business meeting and not have prepared for it and just go through the motions and hope for the best results, right? Like, what you need to do is you need to prepare by doing things like your proper warm up sets. And during these warm up sets, you're not just going through the motions to get blood flow, right? You're not just ticking the boxes. It starts with how is each rep of each set you're performing being performed. And that's with like the proper breathing intentionality. That's all the type of stuff I coach in my sessions. And you're doing that through all of the warm-ups, because the warm-ups are not just for blood flow, it's for neurological coordination and connection with the move. And you're working yourself up. And to be clear, when we say 1 or 2 sets, we're talking like working hard sets to failure, no RAR, right? Maybe one, depending on the move. And so by the time you get to that working set, you know what that working weight's going to be. You know how the movement feels. You are not surprised by that working set. I tell my clients, like, I don't want you to just start doing some reps and then be like, oh, this is my working weight, and then just like go to failure, right? Because you know inherently that it was like this lack of intentionality and preparation for that. Right. So I think a lot of like the ability to take a set to failure, like true failure, comes from proper warm up sets. And by doing 1 or 2 working sets, if you really tap into like every last possible fiber that you can, you're controlled through the whole rep. At failure, you're not losing positioning. You're keeping that 100% on muscle, right? If you can take that all the way to failure where that rep now just slowly works its way down and you can't complete it anymore, that's true failure. But that process started with the proper warm up and intentionality in your warm ups, because now you can carry that intentionality to your working sets, right? You can't just go to your working sets and be like, after non-intentional warm-ups, and then apply intentionality. It doesn't work like that, right? And I think that's where people are not able to get the most out of 1 or 2 sets, is if they're not doing those intentional warm-up sets, because they're just not prepared to work. Even if they want to be, neurologically, they're not ready. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, 100%. And then with the volume idea, if somebody's used to, you know, I'm working my chest today, so I'm going to do a pec fly and a chest press and I don't know, one other push it, like an incline chest press and a regular flat bench chest press or something like that. How would you, and they're doing 3 to 4 sets on each of those, what would that look like instead? Would you split that up 2 each? So now you're doing, like, kind of walk me through that thought process of adding in more angles and different movement patterns.
So I actually have a whole article I've been sitting on for like probably 8 months now. It's called an updated and unbiased approach to volume. And I talk about that exact concept. It's my belief through my experience that, again, instead of doing like, okay, we say we need 12 sets of a muscle to grow it per week. Instead of doing them all in one session, where I think we can all agree there's diminishing returns at some point. Beyond some point, you've already stimulated what you need to, and maybe you're getting very marginal benefit, but increased recovery deficit being acquired, and then you're not training it maybe for a full week because you have to spend the whole week recovering, versus something like, training it 3 or 4 days later. That's like that whole classic train a muscle group twice per week concept. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm saying, okay, if I need these 12, this muscle needs 12 sets of work, I know that within a session I can't execute 12 sets for that muscle productively. So let's say we're going to do 6 and 6, right, in two different workouts. Well, what are all the angles and different subdivisions of something like the chest that we need to hit? What are all like the paths, arm paths that I need to hit? Probably some sort of like a decline-ish press. You could argue a chest press, maybe an incline press, which even then, I think like a high incline shoulder kind of gets most of it, and maybe a pec fly. So we're looking at like maybe 3 to 4 moves for like those 6 sets. And basically, what I go in is I distribute the volume based on, let's say someone's lacking upper pec. Maybe I'll just skew a little bit more of the volume towards like, an incline press, or maybe I'll make it like an incline fly instead of a flat fly. But I'm having now the 6 within that, but I'm trying to hit all these subdivisions. And realistically, something like the back that has a lot of different angles that can be hit, right? A lot of different arm paths. That's where like that volume, you got to make sure you're really being uh, specific with, is it 12 sets for lats? Is it 12 sets for back a total, right? Because now this some of these workouts for bodybuilding can get a little bit longer because I am having to be like, okay, well, I want a inferior angle of the lat to be hit with a little bit of a pullover, and then I kind of want like this high row pull down motion. I want like a mid row, and then maybe like a bent over row style to kind of integrate, tie everything together. That's 4 different moves for the lats in one workout that I think you need to touch each time you train if you really want maximum growth in the lats. And so now, what volume can I handle to recover from that? And it's probably not like 3 sets per exercise, because I still have to do all my upper back work and all my rear delt work, all my bicep work, and my pull day. Does that make sense? So I like to boil that volume per set down, because if you really think about it, if you take a set hard to failure with a lot of intentionality, that muscle is working 100% of the time, you don't need to do a whole lot more. And in those of you that have trained really hard know what I'm talking about. You get done with that set, you're like, I got a lot of that. I got a lot of that muscle. Maybe I'll do one more to top it off. And then you move on to the next move. And now, yeah, you're 6 to 8 sets for your last of the day, and you're good. I'll trade again in 4 days later, right?
Yeah, and as somebody who's kind of transitioned to, when I was super minimalistic, it was one to four sets per muscle group per week, and now it's typically I'm doing two working sets per muscle that I'm targeting, and I can't, like, if I'm training the right way, when I finish that second set, like the thought of doing a third set is like there's no fucking way, like I can't. Or I could do it, but I couldn't do it with the same weight, or I have to recover for 5 or 10 minutes first. So I think kind of shifting that perspective, and if you're the type of person that is taking 90 seconds to 2 minutes of rest, and you're able to do four sets of an exercise, you're probably leaving too much in the tank for each of those previous sets in order to be able to allow yourself to do that. So I love that idea, and obviously splitting the volume, and that's where a place like obviously Jacked and Lean Gym becomes so beneficial, because you have so many different movement patterns that you can hit. And having a gym, obviously, if you don't have something like Jacked and Lean, like finding different exercises that you can substitute in that are going to hit those different movement patterns is great. Anything else to add to like the volume or intensity perspective before we kind of move on to nutrition and meal planning?
I have a lot to add, but I think that covered a lot. I think that covered a lot of it. Like I said, I'll have the article coming out soon. Maybe you guys can read. But again, identify all that unique angles that you want to hit for that muscle. And basically, I believe in hitting that now at, twice a week or so. And then what you do is you just take the amount of volume that you can effectively do in a session, or productively do, I should say, and then distribute that amongst those moves you need to do, right? And that usually comes down to just like 1 or 2 sets per exercise. And so I think it's not even like I'm not partial to 1 or 2 sets just because it's 1 or 2 sets. It's because in practice, if I have to hit that many different angles of a muscle to maximize its growth, I physically can't do more sets than that without driving myself into a hole. So just a little logical
Yeah,
framework for you to think about.
no, that totally makes sense. When we talk about nutrition, obviously you touched a little bit on this. I'd love to kind of get your, if you had 2 minutes to explain to somebody what are the foods that they should be eating to drive their goals and why. And obviously that's a tough question, right? Because it's going to be very person dependent. But just big picture, Jacked and Lean, overview. should they be tracking? How much protein? How many fruits and veggies? And then I've got this quote that I've heard you say 1,000 times: "No one ever got fat eating fruit." So, how would you kind of layer that in with somebody who comes to you that maybe it's their first day in the gym and they haven't actually committed to coaching or anything yet, but you're kind of giving them a tour and they're like, "Jack, you're a really smart guy. What should I do for my diet?" And by the way, I've got to go in 2 minutes.
Actually happens to me like multiple times a day, and then I know it does.
I'm sure.
So high level overview: fruit, meat, eggs. I think you can't go wrong if you center your diet around meat, eggs, and fruits. And then within the fruit, have a few different sources, or in a few different sources even within the meat. If you start there, and then as far as like a protein target, I think everyone's really obsessed with 1 gram per pound. And what I have found is that this just, I mean, based on your body composition, that's one of the really the biggest driver of it. Like if you're 350 pounds, now you don't need a gram per pound or even zero point 0.7 grams per pound. It kind of comes down to this reasonable allocation per meal of somewhere between 3 and 5 feedings per day. And if you can focus on a nice even distribution of something, if we're talking to men here, let's say an average male is, I don't know, 180 to 220 pounds, and if even if you're more, this would still apply to you. Something like 40 to 50 grams 4 times a day. I think that comes to that's a very reasonable amount of protein. That's like 160 to 200 grams per day. And I guarantee you're going to be building the muscle you need, especially if you're training appropriately and sleeping and doing all these other things. So meat, eggs, fruits, 40 to 50 grams of protein, four-ish, roughly 4 times per day. And that sets a very good foundation for your meal plan. And maybe, a little bit of vegetables a couple times a day. But again, no one's ever gotten fat of eating too many blueberries. I'm a huge fan of blueberries. I'm a huge fan of,
Tell that to bears.
yeah, right. Yeah, man. If I was as strong and as built as a bear, I'd be all right with that.
Be like, oh, I'm getting too fat for hibernation. I gotta lean up. All right, let's dive in a little bit to sleep again, just kind of high level. Obviously, you work with a lot of people who haven't optimized this at all. We all have heard the recommendation 7 to 8 hours. What are kind of some actionable things that people can do if they're struggling with that aspect? And this might obviously tie into the psychology piece as well. But what is some stuff that people can really low hanging fruit that they can maybe start to incorporate, or even a little more complex stuff that they can look at maybe from a blood work perspective, to really start hopefully dialing in their sleep?
Well, number one, I think more people just need to think about sleep as more important than they think it is. If you don't deem sleep as that important, what are the chances you're going to prioritize it? I'm a business owner with 2 young kids. Like I'm about as busy as a person could possibly be. So this comes from a place of experience, like personally, that sleep drives everything. Like it drives your hunger signaling the next day, so that you don't have those cravings. It drives your energy level so you can be more productive at work and be more attentive with your family. And it drives your recovery so you can perform better in the gym and grow the muscle you want. Like that's sleep. And it's crazy because for as high level of coaching as I do with people, for something that's as foundational as sleep, like it's hard to quantify the impact it has. And if I could just drill that through everyone's head, that if you are not sleeping 8.5 hours, even close to 9 hours a night, you are not going to be maximizing any of your results. And then you might say, well, Jack, I'm going to sacrifice that hour for more business work. And I could tell you a million examples of someone who slept that extra hour and actually gained 2 hours back later in the day because they were more efficient with things. So number one, you just have to think about sleep as being extremely important, and that will completely and then to allot the time for it. If you don't think it's important, you're not going to allot the time for it. So now you actually go to bed, give yourself the chance to sleep for 8 hours, and then we can start to troubleshoot if there are issues like falling asleep, staying asleep. And I have a pretty basic framework for when it comes to like troubleshooting some sleep issues. There's a psychological and a physiological component to sleep. Logically, and things like we have to upregulate like melatonin and GABA and some of these other like calming hormones and neurotransmitters to help you fall asleep, right, and stay asleep. So that's number one. So things like some basic supplementation can help set the physiological mechanism for it, but it will not put you to sleep, but it can help enhance that process. And this, I like to think about sleep as like a whole cascade, like it's like a symphony, right? To maybe the Jack Dealing kind of sleep protocols, take some supplements to help driving these things in hour and a half before bed, right? And then there's that So that starts the physiological cascade. And then there's the psychological portion of, like, if you're ruminating and you're stressed and you have all these things on your brain, and you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're thinking about things, can't fall asleep. Well, you're probably just stressed, and you need to do some basic physiological or psychological techniques like brain dumping. I have people who have a hard time with, like, clearing their mental RAM, I call it, just talking to a voice memo. Write down every single thing on their brain until it's completely empty. Plan your day, do your daily check-in, like all these things once you've taken these supplements. So now you're starting to, like, okay, physiological cascade's going, psychological cascade is going. I've brain dumped. I feel better. The stress is all out of my brain. And then the last component is like some red light to help continue to calm that nervous system overall. So I have people put like little red light night lights in their bathroom and maybe in their bedroom. I have them go take a shower. The warming of the body temperature and then causing it to bring itself down is also going to help with the sleep cascade. Take a shower, brush your teeth, all in red light. It's amazing how, like, this red light is a calming effect in your nervous system compared to even like a dim, like, normal light. Right. So now you've taken the supplements, you've brain dumped, you did this, and this whole physiological, psychological cascade comes together to help you fall asleep. So think about sleep as important, allot the time for it, do have a rhythm like what I just explained. And I see that troubleshoots most sleep issues.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously, once you start to switch that on to where you're focusing on your sleep, I think people quickly realize that it is probably the most important aspect of their entire training routine because, like you mentioned, you can't drive anything else. You're not going to continue to see progress if you're not actually taking care of yourself on that end. Doesn't matter how many other supplements or anything you're taking. With the psychology aspect, when it comes to, like men specifically, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you notice or things that are common that you have to kind of overcome from a coaching perspective that people are maybe struggling?
Well, there's obviously a bit of, like, the ego, the male ego, right? I know what I'm doing. I played high school football type situation, right? Like, I know how to lift weights, I know how to eat, just eat steak, right? Like, it's not that important, it's not that hard. That's the number one thing I see is just the male who's not willing to allow themselves to be helped. And understand that maybe they are really damn good at what they do in their business, but they're not good at this because they are overweight and out of shape. And cool, if you know what to do, then go do it. But you're not, right? Okay, so now where is that hang up? Is it just not important to you? Have you not identified what is important to you? Right? If I can kind of break through that and get the person just admit that they want something and that I can help them get it, then I see psychologically, like, that sets the stage for a lot of progress, right? But they're kind of coming to me always saying that they know better, they can do it. Then I'm like,
I
great, this.
used to bench 315, Jack. When I was in high school, I benched 315. So I obviously, I don't need you. No, I think that's great too, and that's something obviously a lot of men struggle with. And this is just kind of an aside, and just something I've noticed, especially with some of the big bodybuilders that you see in your. It was funny you were talking about, like, if you're 350 pounds, you probably don't need 350 grams of protein. But then I'm thinking of some of the giant motherfuckers that I've seen at your gym that are 350 pounds of just pure beef. So maybe the recommendations are different if you're not 350 pounds and obese, and 40% body fat. But just the what I was getting at was just the humbleness. I'm thinking of Mike Palm specifically, and Mike and I have only had a few interactions, but he is like the nicest guy, and he doesn't have any ego or anything about him. And every time I see him, it just makes me think of like the guys who are struggling to get there but can't let go of that like piece of like, I know what I'm doing, I'm a man. And then seeing somebody that's like literally twice the size of me but is like, hey, it's just the nicest. And that's pretty widespread, I feel like, in the bodybuilding community. Like, these guys that are these freaking mass monsters, like, don't take themselves too seriously, and they understand the value of coaching, and they know that they don't know everything, and they want to constantly improve and get better. And if you can kind of get over that hurdle for yourself, I feel like it makes a huge difference. So the last piece I wanted to talk about before I let you go, because I know you're a busy guy as well, is just this idea of hormone optimization. And obviously this can have a big impact on all those other things we talked about: sleep, the psychology, motivating you in the gym by seeing more results. But obviously, like things like TRT are super popular right now, but lots of men don't have any idea what it is or where to start. So again, if somebody came to you and they wanted to maximize their genetic potential, can you kind of walk us through what that conversation might look like?
That's a fantastic question. Real quick aside, I love the comment about Mike. Mike's a fantastic guy, and if you anyone wants to know what all I'm talking about looks like manifested, it's Mike. The way he just like rolls through sessions, doesn't take shit too seriously, but like seriously enough at the same time, realizes that bodybuilding can be everything, but also still. Anyway, I just that was a great comment. I just want to give him a shout out too.
Yeah,
He's
every
great.
time I see him, he like waves at me like
He's
he's
great.
super serious. He's zoned in, like looks like he wants to rip your face off. And then I see him, oh
He's not an
hi,
asshole.
hey.
Hey,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I love that was a great example, dude. So to now the conversation about like the hormones, basically, I think every male, I mean, even like in the mid 20s, depending on how you feel, assuming everything else is in check, but like more so like in the third, in your starting in your 30s, I'd get your levels, especially testosterone levels, checked at least twice a year. So I usually have guys just like start with a test, and if the test comes back and your testosterone levels are 600 to 1,000, you're probably good depending on what your goals are, right? But if they come back in the 2 or 300 and you have been having some issues recovering, building muscle, you have a little more body fat, just sexual function or drive isn't quite there, then we might want to talk about getting baseline TRT. And I think a lot of guys, and I just had another client ask me the other day, he's like, what can I do to maximize this naturally and optimize? And there's a whole host of things we can talk about another time. But I said also, man, realistically, if you were already doing like 75-80% of these things right, you're probably not going to triple your testosterone. Now, there might be people that claim that and take this supplement and blah, 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 blah. But realistically, if you're like in the 250, 300 range, it's probably not going to go up to 1,000. And if you want to build serious muscle mass and be that guy who's in like the 1,000 to 1,500 range, you're probably not going to get there natural. So doing some like baseline testosterone replacement therapy, I'm a huge fan of for most guys, even a guy who's like in the 500-600 range and wants to just optimize. And we can talk dosage and amounts and kind of whatever, but just have that conversation of, hey man, just get checked. If it comes back in a great range, we can just go from there based on how you feel. And we can even try it and see how you feel. And then if we feel like it's not doing much or whatever, we can go from there, right? But I think it is a very, very low hanging fruit for males, especially beyond the age of 30, to like just optimize the way they feel, function.
Yeah, and I think there's it's gotten less, but there's certainly still a big stigma around this idea of like, people feel like TRT is cheating or it's steroids or something along those lines. And I can just speak from my own experience. Like I was that guy in the 300 range when we were working together before, and I've been training for 20 years. Super stressed. There was probably some things I could have changed and tweaked that would have helped because I was in a really stressful work environment at the time that wasn't helping where I was at. But the difference I felt almost immediately from starting TRT was like it's the biggest difference I've ever felt in my like change in my personal health perspective, if that makes sense. So, and it's not something you necessarily like you start it and you feel it the next day, but it's like after a couple weeks, it's like, oh, I have more energy. Oh, my sets are doing better. Oh, I can actually like function better just in life. I'm sharper, all of those things. So, you know, getting away from that, especially if you have that mindset of like, I don't want to be, I don't want to be one of those guys or whatever it is. I think if you don't want to get on TRT, that's fine. But like you said, we have so many in this current environment we're in, and this is like kind of a larger commentary on the health of the American in general, but like we're not in a good place for most people, right? So, we're doing things, we're not sleeping enough, we're eating foods that aren't good for us, and we put ourselves in this like really hypo testosterone environment where it's like we're just not really men anymore, for lack of a better word, and
Mm-hmm.
there's this really low hanging fruit that's become super popular. And I still think you obviously need to go through reputable places and work with people who understand what they're doing. So if somebody's interested in taking that step, they've done their hormone test and they're in that 2 to 400 range or something, and they just want to know how to move forward, what would be like some beginning steps that you would recommend to someone? You can talk about some dosages and things too if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first thing is to, if you can, find a clinic, or I work with an online clinic that can work with you virtually, which is the accessibility of this stuff nowadays, and like a pharmaceutical grade prescription, like legal dose, like all that is awesome. It's gotten way cheaper as well, and what's really cool about testosterone is what basically what you were alluding to earlier is that, like, if you already have all this stress and everything else going on, sometimes it's really hard to, and I talk about this concept a lot, everything in your life is moving one direction, really negative, and everything in our society is moving one direction. To go the other direction, if you already have momentum in the wrong direction, it's really hard to put the brakes on and flip that and go the other way, right? And so sometimes these low-hanging fruits like testosterone replacement therapy, where it can at least take care of that with some bioidentical ish injection of testosterone, so we know what it's going to be in your body, we know what it can start to do, and at least takes that burden off of your body, off of your mind, so that you can now have the basis to then start cascading more positively in general, right? So that's like a big selling point used on a lot of guys. Like, that's why sometimes I do think there's medications in general that have decent validity, or at least an application of, like, it's maybe not something we want to do long term, but at least helps us bridge the gap right now so that you can start moving things in the right direction, right? And anyway, but TRT is also something you can sustain for a very long time, because true TRT is a low level dose. So as far as like kind of where to start dosing wise, anywhere from like 100 to 200 milligrams a week. I find most guys 150, 200, 200 seems to be a really sweet spot where, like, you're just maybe a little bit over like the natural range, right? You're feeling really good. You're recovering well in the gym. There's not crazy side effects 95% of the time. And even those few side effects are usually just related to something else. It's like a little bit of estrogen levels you need to just manage by detoxing better through the liver, losing a little body fat or something. It's nothing serious, like no big heart issues, etc. So anywhere from like that 100, if you want to start low, you titrate up every couple weeks until you hit about the 200 mark. Do have some guys go to like the 300 range, and then beyond that, like, we're definitely well out of the range of like TRT. Now it's more recreational use, but that baseline of like 100, 150, maybe 200, you really can't go wrong in my experience. And I work with a lot of guys who are getting on this like the very first time. Like, that's one of my favorite types of people to work with. They're like, want to optimize a little more, feel better, and like they know that this is the next step.
Yeah. And being one of those guys that's been on it for a little over a year now, and making that transition too. And I started at a pretty low dose, and that was even super beneficial for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still not even up to the 200 range, but I know a ton of guys that's basically like the starting point for a lot of people. So
Right.
I would say you
Right.
definitely have to do some investigation with what kind of site you're working with. And I know the place you are talking about is reputable. The guys that you actually sent me to originally
Mm-hmm.
is a company called Rise that's based out of Florida now. That I think I told you the story. You sent it to me without knowing anything about the connection that I might have. And the guy who owns Rise is a buddy of mine from college. So
That
like
was crazy.
the one random place you happen to send me, and shout out Rise. They've been really good to us, and they've been really good to me, and super helpful as well. But it's something like, if you've thought about it but you're just not sure, it's something that could do all these other things first, right? Like, if you're not doing anything and you haven't even started working out, for instance, and you want to just start
Right.
TRT, like, I mean, yeah, that might help you feel a little better, but it's probably not the thing you're looking for. But if you've started to be consistent, if you've been working out, if you've maybe started working with a coach, you're starting to see some progress, but you, like you said, you just can't shift that negative momentum that's happening, to add something like this in that's super beneficial, super highly regulated, really safe to use, very little negative side effects. Like, I think this is really like, I was talking about this 10 years ago before I even started on testosterone. Like, I thought this was going to be the standard of care for men going forward in like 10 or 15 years, because it makes such a powerful impact on people. And instead, now the standard of care is like, give 5-year-olds Ozempic. But that's the, that's the world we live in. But yeah, so from that optimization perspective, is there anything else, if somebody's interested in doing this, like obviously you gave kind of the dosing recommendations, any other places that they can learn more, or do you have a company that you work with that you want to recommend as well?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Rise is a fantastic company. I've worked at a company called well, they were called Helix. Now they're called Talon. Talon, I believe. They're also very good too. Just options for people when it comes to the TRT, and just optimization in general. Meaning, where are my breaks in the chain? And I just think so much of optimization comes down to awareness. Again, where do I want to be? Where am I now? Where are these breaks in the chain? And if we kind of want to just harken back to the psychology piece just a little bit in terms of optimization, it's okay if you don't want to optimize things in your life. I would always ask why. Like, why don't you want to feel the best you've ever felt? And I would say you don't know how good you can feel until you feel really damn good. But if we're talking specifically to males here, you say, I'm a man of my word, but you say you're going to do something, you don't do it. Like, what kind of guy does that make you? Right? Like, and I believe that is our duty as males to try to like become the best versions of ourselves possible for our businesses and our families and everything else around us. So optimization is not even just like this frivolous pursuit a lot of time. I think it's somewhat like inherently like as humans is one of the reasons why I think society has slipped negatively is because people stopped pushing themselves. They stopped seeking higher versions of themselves, or like you have this switch because you pursue business at a high level and you're a great father, but why the hell aren't you in shape, man? Right? Like I can't fathom that. And so optimization, again, like I said, it's a sliding scale. And sure, it does not mean to be like professional bodybuilder level. And if you want to get to that level, this whole conversation is going to be a little bit different, and we're already having a conversation more specifically going from there. But like if we're talking optimization in terms of like your sleep, just a lot of the time make it important. The food, meat, eggs, fruit, dial in the amount you need, make sure digestion's good. Train hard as hell, 4, 5 days a week with enough volume to make sure that muscle's getting stimulated. Get some TRT if you're low on it, and some basic supplementation to like help you if you need to like ride, some micronutrients, but also like some neurotransmitter production. If you're doing that stuff, you're pretty damn optimized, right? Now the question is just like, can you stay in it longer than anybody else? And I think a lot of this just comes from momentum. I think a lot of optimization is just momentum. It's not just one day. It's not just a week or a month. Like if you can roll this day over day, month over month, year over year, all of a sudden now all these little issues you were having have also flipped because they just have snowballed positive.
Yeah, and that's really a perfect recap of everything too, because you kind of hit all those points as well. The only last thing I would add is I think the only thing, and correct me if I'm wrong on here, that we've talked about that you could potentially do if you're not optimizing right now to maybe flip your hormone kind of output first before you start something like TRT would be sleeping. Like if you're doing all the other stuff right and your test is at 200 but you only sleep 4 hours a night, like that's probably the thing you should fix first and then look at going on something like TRT. But no, I agree. I mean, if you're in that space where it's like you're looking to make that next step, all of these things that we discussed today, and not necessarily in any particular order, but I would say for most people, starting with the volume and intensity in their workouts, the intentionality, really focusing on the sleep, obviously nutrient, like they're all like there's not one really valued higher than the others. It's just doing all of these things. And if you can commit to doing that stuff, like you're going to be on the right path. And if you start to feel that change and that difference, look for somebody like Jack. Find a coach that can really help you dial in the specifics, because it is, hard to continue to do this on your own. And like you said, it's something you got to do for forever. So learning how to actually maintain it on a sustainable basis, I think is super important to make sure that you are the best version of yourself for you, for your kids, for your community, for your business, for all of those other things that you're trying to, pursue going forward. So Jack, anything else to add before I let you go today? That was a great recap, man.
Yeah, this is a great chat, man. I think I just want to drive home the importance of like that intentionality in just everything they do. I believe optimization and seeking these next levels in life come from just being intentional with your thoughts and your actions, realizing that nothing in life is random. The way you feel, the way you function, the way your business runs, the way your family is, the way your kids, like everything is the result of someone's thoughts, actions, or lack of action. And so if you just aren't where you want to be, start taking a different action. And that comes from that awareness that we've just covered ad nauseum at this point now. And then realizing you have the power to control every single one of those thoughts and actions. And if you cascade them for long enough, eventually you are optimized and feeling the best you've ever felt, man. So, yeah, nothing in life is random.
I love that. I love that. Great way to finish it up here. For everyone, thank you so much for listening. Catch another episode here in a couple weeks. And if you're in the Rogers area, or if you're in Minnesota at all, get your butt to Jackson Lean Gym. Check it out. If you're interested in doing coaching, I think it's just, is it jacktonlean.com?
Yeah, yep, www.jacktonlean.com.
Yeah, and
And
we
the
I'll,
gym
I'll
has a
link all
website as
that
well.
to the yep, I'll link all that in the description as well. Jack, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back soon.